Xin chào. Tên tôi là Sam. Và đây là Si Hui. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yay! Hello, I'm Sam, and this is Si Hui. It's our first time in Ho Chi Minh, so we are very excited to be here. We work in government digital services in GovTech Singapore, and it's you can think of us like a digital agency for the rest of Gov. So just now, I think it was Yuan, you talked about design team structures. So what we have is a lot of dedicated designers and researchers in each product team. And Si Hui is the lead researcher for the digital identity product team, and she works with another researcher as well as 3 UX designers. My role is more part-time. I come in and I help them to think about the quality of research. I guide them on product strategy. And I also support other kinds of projects. So what we're going to do today is try and cover 3 things. We'll give you some background on what the digital identity product is, and then we'll share a bit more about the research that we did, and hopefully at the end you can understand why context matters. Okay. So long before digital identity, there was this thing called SingPass. And it was introduced in 2003 as a way for us to log into all the different kinds of government e-services with just one account, right? So whether or not you want to book a clinic appointment or you want to renew your passport, instead of creating a multiple login and ID for every government website, you can just use SingPass. So this is how it looks like. Let's say you want to apply for a public housing flat. So you go to the housing website, and then you click login, which is at the top. Okay, then it will redirect you to SingPass website to log in. Once you are done, it will bring you back to the e-service website, and then you can continue. So this is great, but it's not without its problems. Sometimes people will forget their password, or if they use the hard token for their 2FA, two-factor authentication, sometimes the token doesn't work. Or if they're overseas and their 2FA is an SMS, and it can take quite a long while to arrive, and then by the time they need to go already. So what the team did was to launch SingPass mobile app, you can see on the right. So the app is a way for people to use SingPass without using their password. Right? So how it works is you can see, if this is the desktop website, at the corner there is like a little QR code. So if you click that, it will ask you to scan the QR code with the app. So what this does is the QR code acts as a way to log in, but also as a way to get the 2FA. So you don't need the hard token anymore, you don't need the SMS anymore. Okay? So you just need to set up one time, and then that's it. You don't ever have to type the password again. So once you scan the QR code, it will further ask you to verify. Use your phone touch ID or your facial recognition to further verify who you are. Or if you don't have that or you don't want to use it, you can also create a 6-digit passcode. And then you are logged in. Yay! So that is a brief introduction to the digital identity background. And what SingPass and SingPass Mobile is really the start of our National Digital Identity Product, or NDI for short. So when we talk about designing Singapore's digital identity, we are looking at the design of each of those products, but also looking at the overall product vision and strategy, right? So both tactical as well as strategic. And so as the researchers, we are starting to look at this and say, what kind of research can we run in order to help design NDI as a product, both the tactical design as well as the strategic design.
So I'm going to go a little bit into the research that we have been doing. And our research with NDI actually started off with research for SingPass Mobile before the launch last year. And this portion of research in this study focused more on the digital interface and digital interactions of SingPass Mobile. So as I was saying, there's a login mechanism with QR using SingPass Mobile. And this actually comes with two possible form factors. One is that you scan the QR code on the desktop, but if you have a phone, you can't scan your own phone, right? So we actually implemented interaction to tap on the QR code to log in on the phone browser. And in this study, we wanted to find out whether people were able to log in both on the desktop and on the mobile phone. And when we went out and did usability testing, we found that there were lots of good stuff about the service. So people found it easy to set up. They found that login was very fast. And for us, that was great, right? Like, we've got a great service, great interaction, we're good to go. But we found one major blocker along the way, which was that people couldn't find the QR code on the desktop. Right? So when we first started, the designers thought that having a QR code in the corner of the existing login screen would be quite easy for people to see and to find. But that wasn't the case. So people asked, oh, do I have to click cancel to find the QR code they want to scan? And after finding this, we played with different options together with designers. We kind of diverged and looked at what else could we do to make this more obvious without breaking the existing flow for existing users, without putting too much stress on engineering, right? And together in collaboration, we arrived at implementing a call-out on top of this login screen instead. And this is one example of how research actually influences the interface design on the products that we work on. Another assumption that the team had initially was that app switching wasn't that hard. So app switching is when you are logging in through SingPass Mobile, and with some phones and with some desktop browsers, you actually can't easily switch back that quickly. And initially we thought that, say, you can now switch back to your digital service would be easy for everyone to understand. But what we found out through research was that it wasn't a common term. Participants didn't always understand what we wanted them to do when we said this. And through research, we identified terms that people were more familiar with, like browser or app, that made it more direct and simple for them to understand, and therefore perform the action and complete the task. So through these interviews for usability testing, we also looked at 4 different archetypes of SingPass users. So how people currently already use SingPass. And these 4 archetypes were power users, people who log in very frequently, whether for work or for personal reasons. And they frequently log in on the go. So let's say they're in the train or subway, and they take out their phone and they want to do something with it. These people fall here. We also have people who are more careful users. They also have very high needs to log in frequently, but they are more careful. They want to look at desktops, they want bigger screens, and they trust the desktop over the mobile phones. And there are people who use SingPass less as well. So people who are simple users, maybe you log in once a year, you just want to file your taxes and go, and you want the simplest, fastest solution possible. And lastly, we have reluctant users. So people who very rarely log in, but when they have to perform action with the government service, they prefer to do it with physical interactions. Let's say going to a counter, even if they travel all the way down. So getting an understanding of these 4 archetypes meant that we were able to focus the engagement at launch on the first 2 types of users, those who actually had high usage needs, and to fit the messaging more closely to them. But at the same time, it was a good reminder for the product team that we needed to do a bit more to support the people in the bottom row who actually needed a lot more support and understanding, and including them in future plans. So beyond interface, visual design, and copy, what we do with research is to inform strategy and comms, and all these teams work carefully together to support the product. So in digital research, we were looking at exploring new interactions for an existing behavior and an existing service. And so for this study, we went out to do usability testing. We don't do it in the office. We go to people's homes or we go to cafes where they're a bit more comfortable. And when people are more comfortable, they open up to you more and they show you more things. So for example, we had an old lady who actually took out this little notebook, and it was full of all her passwords that she has for all her e-services, and she shows all of this to us. And that's not possible if we just bring her into the office. Another example would be that if you go to people's homes, you can actually meet their family members, you meet the people who are helping them or who they are helping in logging on all these e-services. So they will say like, oh, actually this is very easy for me, but my wife always has problems whenever she wants to log in. So you can come and meet her and we can talk about it. So like for the interview, we get a 2-for-1 deal, which is great, right? And
Sometimes 5 for 1 deal.
that's a bit harder to manage. Yeah. The whole family sometimes wants to participate. And what we do with this context is that here context is able to inform design because we are able to find out how we should be clear and simple in our language and in our directions to guide users along the way. We're able to disprove our own assumptions. So at the beginning of the study, the team thought that, oh, clicking on a QR code on the mobile phone is going to be really strange. But we found out that actually people found it more intuitive than they expected. And it helped us to guide our launch and our strategy. So to focus on power and careful users first, because they're the people who have the most incentive and the most need for this app in the first place.
So after SingPass Mobile was launched, then we started thinking, okay, what else can this app do to support NDI? Is it only for logging in to government services? What else can we do in the app? Could we maybe help people to verify their identity without using the physical ID card? Right? So they can use the app instead of a physical ID card. So to test this in the physical world, we use this technique called body storming. Body storming basically means you physically set up the experience, a bit like this, with prompts, and then you physically test it with people. And so we picked a few common scenarios that most people are familiar with. Here you can see 2. So one is the visitor registration at the hospital, and the other one is if you need to go to a building, and sometimes they have the security, and normally you need to show your ID, change your pass, and then they will let you in. So what if we could change some of those existing behaviors? So body storming comprises of a few things. You normally have props that try to help people imagine what the real situation is. And it's okay that they look very basic. Boxes, cardboard is fine. People can use their imagination. And then you need actors. You need actors to play the machines. So these actors don't talk. As much as they would like to, they cannot talk. And then they also have actors playing humans, like maybe security guards. And the last thing that you need in body storming is a detailed script. Because what you're doing is asking people to role play, right? Pretend you are coming to the hospital, and then can you try registering yourself as a visitor? And in this scenario, everybody in the team needs to know what is the scenario supposed to be, what are they supposed to do, and if they are the human actors, what are they supposed to say? Right? So that's where the detailed script will come in. And when you do research for digital products in the physical space, you kind of end up seeing very interesting behaviors. So for example, let's say this is the sensor for the QR code. Some people will go there and then they'll wave. And I don't know what they think the hand can do, but they'll check to see if the sensor is working. If the sensor is lower, then they will squat down. And sometimes they think that, oh, maybe the sensor is here, I need to stand a certain distance away before I can scan. So it's just so fascinating how all these different mental models are there just around scanning. Right? Or sometimes you get to see very different emotions. So participants who are more savvy, tech savvy, will get very excited because they think like, oh, this is good. I don't have to bring my wallet out next time. If I'm going clubbing, I can just bring my phone. I don't have to bring my phone and the ID card. But then you have the older people who start to get quite worried because I only just learned how to use a smartphone, and then now got this new QR code. And QR code actually looks pretty simple to maybe a lot of us, but even that, as simple as that, can be scary to some people. Okay. So the value of doing this kind of research is really helping to deepen your knowledge about emotions, getting richer insight about how are people really feeling about the way the product is used. We talked about the scanning. So in this case, when I need to scan, do you scan me or do I scan you in a physical world, right? So if you are scanning me, that means my phone is like this. My screen is facing away from me so that you can scan me. But that means I cannot see what's on my screen. So how do I feel then? Maybe I feel a bit less in control. I don't feel very assured. Right? So if we didn't test it in a physical space, we wouldn't really know that actually maybe we should change the position of the sensor or the kiosk so that we can allow the users to scan this way up so that they can see what's on the screen, they can see what is actually happening during the processing period, and then they actually feel in control. The props, even though they look very basic, and then the participants will come in and it's like, ha ha ha, what's this? Like, what's going on? But after a while, they really start to interact with it like it's the real thing. So you can see at the end, the last picture, this is a living room setup, and we have this very like flimsy looking cardboard gate. But they even start to think that, okay, this is my real home and this is my real gate. So when the role play starts and the nurse comes to visit their grandmother to do a checkup, they'll be like, I don't know if I want to open this gate for the nurse. And then if I'm scanning the nurse's identity, is it enough? Is the information going to be enough for me to feel safe? Right? And then actually when I'm scanning the nurse's phone, can I also see what is on the nurse's phone? Again, to have that reassurance, to have that control before I let a stranger into my house. And finally, like you can bring your stakeholders along to experience this kind of research. And our director actually said that, wow, I have been thinking about this product for a long time, but thinking about it is very different from experiencing it and feeling what the interactions really are like. So I think that really helped to change his perspective.
So for us, understanding how people might use our product physically is important, but it's not enough. What we need to know, because people don't just use our product alone, right? They're not just using Fast Mobile, that's the only app on their phone. In the real world, people use lots of other apps and products and services, and we need to know how the experiences and the attitudes they have towards these products and services will actually shape their expectations towards our product or any form of digital identity. So, just a quick question, like how many of you here have paid for a meal using a QR code before? Yeah, in Ho Chi Minh? So, just one context that's important to us. In Singapore, within the last 2 years especially, there's been more and more QR codes used for payment. So it can be at a retail shop, it can be at F&B locations. Even there's like hawker centers, like this is quite a traditional looking store, but they've got like a QR code where you can pay using different methods. So in this context, Singaporeans are actually quite familiar with QR codes, but mainly in the payment context. So they see a QR code, the link would be, oh, it's for payment, right? Another context that's quite important to us and that we're going to talk a bit more about is that Singaporeans are very fond of their physical ID cards. So in this photograph, it's actually a government clinic, and the man is actually passing over his senior ID card, and with this ID card, he can then get subsidies or benefits because he's a senior. So people are very fond of using their ID cards, whether you go to like army camp, whether you go to a club, whether you go to a hospital, people use one of their physical documents. So in current state research, what we want to understand is looking at what are the behaviors and attitudes for similar technology or similar use cases that we can learn from. So we do different things. One of the things we do is ethnographic observations. So we go out to different places, not just myself, but researchers, designers, we go together and we go and look at what people actually do in the real world. So for example, that's Zouk, is one of the more popular clubs in Singapore, and you have a lot of teenagers lining up outside of Zouk every Friday night, Saturday night. So we went to observe and look at what are the interactions and processes like when you use your physical ID to try and get into those clubs. So if let's say I'm the bouncer and there's a line of teenagers in front of me, and you should see how the bouncer takes that ID card and then he'll rub the edge of it a bit. He'll look at teenager, look at the card, look at the teenager, look at the card. And then the teenager's like a bit like scared, right? It's like over there quaking in the boots a little bit. And then you watch the interaction. It's interesting because you don't know whether he actually knows that the card is fake or he's just testing the teenager. So it's interesting to see these social interactions take place and think about how they might translate to a digital product. Another place we went to was the hospitals to observe in-person registration and the use of this self-help kiosk. So there's this kiosk in hospitals, public hospitals, where you can scan your physical ID card and then it tells you, oh, are you here for this appointment? And then you register and you take a queue number. So it's interesting because you start to see the problems that people face in real life. For example, this auntie here, she actually couldn't reach the sensor because she's in a wheelchair and her helper had to scan the ID card for her. But the helper isn't very strong in English. So after the scanning, they ask questions like, have you been to these countries in the last 30 days? Do you have a high fever? And actually after this photo, she turned to me and she said, can you help me finish this process? So it's a lot of in-person human help involved in these processes still. And like in this photo over here, you actually see that the staff have gotten quite used to helping people with the self-help kiosk, which is a bit strange. But knowing all these things means that we then have more context to understand the entire environment and attitudes that people have. So in this case, context helps us to widen our perspective because all these mindsets and expectations that people have are actually shaped by their current experiences. And knowing and going out, and I think it's true not only for researchers but also designers and any stakeholders we work with, it helps to go into the real world because you start to see what your product might be able to do for people. And we see that in these cases, we start to observe what proving identity means, what kind of resources people can get after they've gone through this step. And when we're designing for the whole of the country, we start to see more and more how designing for inclusion is very critical for us because if you can't prove identity, there's so many things that you can't do in the real world. And by having these observations and context, it also gives us the little nuances that are behind the relationships and problems that people face in the real world. And this means that we can then have better design considerations when we are designing our product or digital identity. So translating these needs from a physical identity into what it means for the design of a digital identity is quite important for us.
Okay, so we have been talking a lot about users, right? Looking at users, how they use the product in a physical space, and then also even going further out there and looking at what other things do they do that might affect our product. But then when we build digital products, we work with people, right? Colleagues, stakeholders who make their lives very difficult. And so it's important to look inwards into the organization as well and try to better understand them. So in a very large product family like NDI, we don't just have one product team, we have multiple product teams for each of the new products as they come up, right? And as more and more people join and many people are doing different things, then how will we start to align? So we decided to do some stakeholder interviews so that we can go out and better understand what their roles are, what are you actually doing for NDI, what are your challenges that you face, what are your blockers, what kind of goals do you have, what kind of metrics are you supposed to deliver by the end of the year. And what we found out was that as more and more teams are created, we really have to better collaborate and communicate with each other so that we work towards one single product vision. So what you see here is a stakeholder workshop that we ran. It's not an ideation workshop, not brainstorming, it's really just to align everybody. So we took a while to organize because the team is very big, but we finally got them in and they are looking at all the insights from our research, and we asked them to put post-its up. What do you think about the things that we have synthesized so far? Do you agree or disagree? Which ones do you really feel very strongly about? And the other thing that we did in the workshop was to design a group activity, again, not to create new ideas, but for them to try working with people they don't normally work with. So we paired them, I think it was like 4 to 5 per group, and all these people don't normally work with each other. So it's designed specifically for them to try outside of their normal day-to-day jobs. So to try what is it like to work with people you don't know, and then let's reflect about what the experience like for you. So for example, when you look back at the group activity, did you dominate the conversation? Did you talk too much? Or do you actually have something to say but you were afraid to speak up? Okay, so there's all these different human emotions and behaviors in a team as well. And how can we start to become more aware of each other so that we can work together? Okay, so whether you are just looking at your team or you are looking at your stakeholders, you can do internal research so that you can increase organizational awareness, right? So that you can know what are the interdependencies. That means what some other team is doing maybe needs to happen first before you can do this other thing. Or what are the blockers that each of the teams have? And can we help each other to get rid of the blockers? Or how does your timeline affect my timeline? And then like, okay, how come your thing haven't built yet? Then I cannot release my product. You know, all these little things. Can we also be more open about our roles and responsibilities so that we don't overlap amongst all the teams? And then can we create space and time for each other to share our thoughts, to share our frustrations, to really sit down and think about why are we working this hard for? What are we really working towards? Instead of thinking about my work in relation to myself, how about thinking about how the work contributes to the overall product vision?
So beyond looking at business and beyond looking at our own organization internally, one perspective is can we widen our lens to look forward in time. So if we're building a product and a system for the long run, what does this future world that we're designing actually looks like? So Singapore is a pretty small country. Anything that happens globally affects us instantly. And we want to keep an eye on different kinds of trends. So one would be social trends, things that affect the way people think, the way they act, the way they feel. So for example, things like the aging population is a big problem in Singapore. Things like eroding trust in government that applies across countries. These are important for us to consider when we're building a national product. The other thing we want to look at are emerging tech. So in the context of Singapore, some of these things are already happening. Mixed realities, referring to AR and VR, are already quite common. And we're already testing self-driving cars in Singapore. So what are the possibilities that these new kinds of tech can open up for our product in the future? And how do we prepare for this kind of reality that happens 5-10 years from now? So in the workshop that Sam mentioned earlier, one activity we actually did was to introduce one social trend and one emerging tech to each group of stakeholders. And we got them to ideate on, in this kind of future, what does a digital identity look like? And what does that mean for what we can offer and how we should prepare for it and communicate it. So here are some sources we have actually where you can curate trends, but curate them to your own country and your own context and to your product as well. So it's not about taking all the trends and introducing them at once, but selecting things that would have impact on your product. And when we do ideation around this future state, what this gives us is actually a sense of the realities and possibilities beyond what we have now. So you can see some examples here of the cards that we use, both in terms of the words we use and also the visuals to try and inspire a bit more ideation with some of these topics. And having these trends on hand, having this context, actually creates opportunities for us. Because what we want to do is to not just take the trends at face value, but also to unpack what they mean in terms of the country and in terms of product. And because we combine the social trend and the tech trend, that helps us to spark new combinations that are a bit more diverse, so that increases the range of what we could possibly design for. And we also, because this world changes really quickly, right? So having exercise like this, whether you do it for stakeholders or whether you do it internally, it helps us to be a bit more adaptable in terms of kind of trying to predict what future design needs might look like and what we need to consider as we're moving in that direction.
So at the beginning of the talk, we asked the question, what kind of research can we run to help design NDI? And we started off with SingPass Mobile, looking at the digital interactions and the digital product. And then we looked at, okay, what else can this SingPass Mobile app do in the physical world? And then we used body storming to see how the verified or ID without the card scenario might play out. And then we looked even further into what is the current state of behaviors and mental models in our users' worlds that might affect our product. We also looked at stakeholders, and then we also looked at far into the future and how these new trends might change our world as well. And if you only remember one thing from our talk, we hope that you remember this. It's to widen your research lens. Don't just think about your product, don't just think about your users, but think about what else is happening in the world as well. Right? So don't just do usability testing, do more qualitative research so you can collect the context. And when you can collect the context, not only are you informing design, you are helping to deepen the team's knowledge about emotions, you are helping to broaden the team's perspectives in the user's mental models that affect their expectations of your product. You are helping the team to increase awareness of each other so that we can work better together and to create unexpected opportunities as the future changes.
So in doing all of this, we are able to identify common design principles across the different areas of research that we've done. So here for digital identity specifically, some of the themes that we touch on would be transparency, control, inclusion, reassurance, and underlying all this is trust. And these are not things that come out from a single study, they're things that repeat when we're doing different studies with different mechanisms, with different interactions, or even different use cases completely. So for example, with control, we talk about being scanned and scanning somebody else, all the effects of perception of a digital identity. With inclusion, we talk about who we actually want to serve and where we can actually help them. And things like transparency. So how transparent are we with the data that we're showing to our users and we're showing to other stakeholders involved? And these are all things that are not just for research to consider, but it matters across the board with the different teams that are looking at this. And what these teams give us the ability to do is that when we have these teams in mind across studies, we have the ability to make better design decisions because we have precedents. We have the ability to persuade stakeholders a bit more because they have seen these surface in different studies. And we have the ability to build a product that has a more positive impact for the whole of the country in these considerations. And for us, that is why design, that's why context matters. Come on.
Come on. Thank you. Oh great, they're all for you. I don't have to.
Oh my god, okay.
I think there are only two.
I know it's a
How about we swap sides? Okay.
Chả bao giờ lên còn chả có cái app trên điện thoại luôn.
Oh, the off from so they can decide.
Yay!
Okay, I'll start from the bottom one, which is how do you choose and invite people for testing? I'm not sure it's asking about the why or the how of things. I think the answer in research is always it depends. So what are we trying to find out in this study? What are the considerations? Do we want to get a general sense of usability? Are we looking at something very specific, like a specific use case? So all of these things would decide how we choose and recruit. I will say that we have a screening process. So other than doing online screening recruitment, we also call people because you get a better sense of who people are and how they will respond when you call them and you can talk to them when you do the screening. So for us, that's something we go through.
Yeah, so we do word of mouth. Because we're government, we can't really pay recruiters to recruit for us. So we'll do word of mouth. We might also post things in forums. Like let's say if the product is about financial planning, maybe we will go to a forum that is talking about financial debt or talking about saving up for my retirement. And then we might post there and say, hey, we're doing this research, fill in a survey if you're interested. And then with your contact details, and then we'll call you up separately to do the additional screening that Sydney mentioned.
Okay, so I think we've got two questions about personas and archetypes and how to define them. So when I use archetypes, I use them kind of a launching point, a bit more specific, a bit more lo-fi in that sense. But it helps because it's kept simple and people are able to understand what the important points there are. In terms of product personas, it's not something that I currently look at because, as I say, it's a mass product and it's really not about a persona for the entirety of all your customers, which are 100% of the citizens in the country plus your permanent residents plus etc., right? So it's really more about the individual needs and use cases that we're looking at and how to tackle those.
I would add on to that and say right now, knowing that there are power users and careful users, simple and reluctant is good enough for us because those are the main behaviors that will either drive someone to use it or not use it. As we do and more research, we will definitely be able to add on to those archetypes and start to build up personas, but right now it's not really needed. Cyber security challenges.
Is the person who asked this question able to clarify what the cybersecurity challenges are referring to? Okay, I'm going to take a stab at it. I'm guessing that you're asking when you're doing this kind of testing, being a government agency, what challenges are. I would say that generally we do have participants signing consent forms to say that they won't be sharing all the things they've talked about with anybody on the street. But it isn't such a big challenge that we're faced with security so far, because what we test is not going to be vulnerable in that sense, and it's really a separate process.
And in case the person who asked this question is really thinking about cybersecurity hacks, it is true that sometimes when a government service is affected by an outage or a hack, it can affect the perception of other government services. And I think it just goes back to trust and reassurance and how can we take note of this and work together to maintain the citizens' trust in us that we will take care of their data.
I think, sorry, but we run out of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any question you can ask?
We can always chat afterwards. Okay. Thank you.